I will be analyzing the poem How Do I Love Thee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I have divided this particular chapter into two parts. The first part will be just the introduction of the poet, and the second part will be the detailed analysis of the poem. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was an English poet of the Victorian era. She was born on 6th March 1806 in County Durham, England. She was very popular in Britain and the United States during her lifetime, and even after her death, her works continued to live on. She was the eldest of 12 children, and since childhood, she lived a very happy and comfortable life as a result of her family's immense wealth. They were very wealthy because her father was the owner of a huge plantation in Jamaica, and this gave them great financial security. Elizabeth Browning had private tutors at home and received good education alongside her brothers. She wrote her first poetry from the age of 11, and by the time she was 14, she had her epic poems privately published with copies handed out to members of her family. Her mother was greatly impressed by her literary skills, so she compiled together every poem that she wrote. Her father was also very proud of his daughter's natural talent, that he even referred to her as the poet laureate of Hope End. But very sadly, when she was just 15 years old, she became very ill and suffered intense head and spinal pain for the rest of her life. Later in life, she also developed lung problems, possibly tuberculosis. Due to this, the doctors prescribed her high doses of painkillers, leading to a lifelong dependence on strong medication, and this led to permanently weakening of her body and poor health for the rest of her life. After the death of her mother, Elizabeth and her siblings had to be taken care of by their aunt, with whom Elizabeth did not have a good relationship. She was very hostile towards her aunt. Elizabeth's life turned more bitter after her father fell on debts, poor investments, and regular visits to the court. Her father's financial issues grew worse, and he was even forced to sell his family home. But amidst all these hard times, Elizabeth continued to throw herself into her writing, and in 1838 she published The Seraphim and Other Poems. In the 1840s, she was introduced to the literary society through her distant cousin and patron, John Cannon. Here she associated with great writers like Alfred Lord Tennyson, William Wordsworth, and others. But unfortunately, before too long, Elizabeth found herself very sick. She was suffering from poor health once more, and so she was advised by the doctors to live in area with fresher air. And so she and her brother moved to Devonshire coast and settled in Torquay. But sadly in Torquay, her brother died in a sailing accident. She had no choice after this but to return to London, emotionally and physically drained. But she turned herself to poetry as a means of escape from all her miseries. It was between 1841 to 1844 that she seriously began to write. She published not only poetry but also did translation and wrote prose as well. In the year 1844, she published her volume entitled Poems, which proved to be very successful, not only attracting praise from the general public, but also won the great admiration of a great writer, Robert Browning. Robert Browning started writing letters to her regularly, which she responded. So they started writing regularly to each other and wrote almost 600 letters in a span of 2 years. Through this private literary exchange, they eventually fell in love and decided to get married. By 1846, Elizabeth and Robert Browning were planning to elope as their relationship was not approved by Elizabeth's father. After her father came to know about her secret marriage, she was immediately disinherited and was left with nothing. In 1846 itself, the couple moved to Italy, where she lived for the rest of her life. They had a son named Robert, who was affectionately referred to as Ben. Elizabeth Browning was greatly respected and became very popular in Italy. One of her famous works at that time, Sonnets from the Portuguese, was published in 1850. Unfortunately, her career was cut short due to her prolonged sickness and passed away on 29 June 1861 in Italy at the age of 55. A collection of her later poems were published by her husband shortly after her death.